Hi, everyone. I'm Ellen Dunham-Jones. I'm Director of the Master of Science in Urban Design at Georgia Tech. So here we are now in the Urban Design Studio, and I'm here with Joel Jasu.
Yeah, my name is Joel Jasu, like Ellen has just said. I was born and raised in Uganda. I moved here about 8 years ago, ended up to Georgia Tech for my master's degree in architecture, and I loved it so much when I was in my architecture master's degree that I ended up staying for my MSUD program. And so really glad to be here now at part-time faculty helping teach the urban design studio. So.
And I'm Richard Degenhart. I've been around Georgia Tech for a long time teaching urban design. Joel was one of my students. Both of us, Joel was one of our students. I teach, I'm an architect and a planner. People tell me I think like an landscape architect. I'll talk about that a bit more in minutes. But here we are in the studio, full chaos of the studio that looks normal, I think, for everybody who's been in a studio, particularly at the end of the semester. We're 3 weeks away from the final presentation. And everybody's working, and we've got stuff on the wall and struggling to get through the end of the project.
So Richard teaches the fall studio typically, and always really sort of focuses on a lot of his interests. I tend to teach the spring studio and focus more on mine. I'm also trained as an architect, self-taught as an urban designer, and I do a lot of research, in particular on retrofitting suburbia. And just got my second book published. But Richard, let's back up. Tell us a little about what is urban design?
Urban design, the big question. In one way, I say it's like thinking like an architect, thinking like a city planner, and thinking like a landscape architect, all at the same time.
And
really, what we have to learn in a year in the program is to think like all three of those at the same time. That means thinking about architecture, the physical reality of what we build. Second is the policies that we inhabit, promote, or resist. And third is how we actually deal with the natural world that we're a part of. It's strange, you think about it, that those three things are separate, but they are absolutely separated in silos, as we say, in the current practice. And in the university, what our aim here is to weave those three things together in the studio and supplement it by other courses.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think we are very passionate about the power of urban design to shape our lives, shape our society, shape our economies, and our ecology. And with that power comes a simultaneous need for bold imaginations, creative collaborators, pragmatists, community builders, and a deep knowledge of cities and of what it is that we do have the capacity to bring together, as well as what we don't. Because there's also a lot we can't do.
Right. Ellen, if I want to add something there, when I was a student of Richard and Ellen, I remember my first encounter with urban design, Richard saying that urban design was about designing frameworks. And I remember thinking, what in the world is that? But of course, as you go on to see, there are things in our cities that just don't change, like the blocks, the streets, and the lots. Those are permanent things. And as urban designer, we spend a lot of our time designing the framework and sort of a foundation onto which the over time happens. I think it's just an incredible, different way of thinking about the built environment.
Yeah, and I use 4 measures to try to explain what we do and how we evaluate what we do. Not in any sort of technical way, but to say, first is, do the projects we work on enable accessibility and diversity in all kinds of ways that we use those words. Second, does it enable diversity? So accessibility, then diversity, and then third, does it enable the weaving of natural processes into urban conditions? And then finally, and the one that Joel mentioned, the ability to change over time. We're not architects when we do urban design. I've been around long enough that I've designed buildings that no longer exist. So things come and go that we do as architects. As urban designers, we're working on frameworks that then exist for a long period of time, but the projects that we do on top of those change over time much more rapidly. Sometimes I use the word that an old professor of mine used, that what we do is design frameworks for 1,000 designers. So we don't design all this stuff. It's the city of 1,000 designers who actually designing the framework.
Well, I think what's also really important about the distinction, because between urban, there's, I think, a couple distinctions we need to make between urban design and architecture, which is what most of the students who come to the program have a degree in, although we love getting landscape architects, planners, civil engineers as well, but also the distinction between urban design and urban planning. And I think one of the things I'll start off with sort of the distinction between and architecture is, generally speaking, an architect has to convince one client to spend gazillion dollars, but you're just addressing that one client. The architect, the urban designer has to convince an entire community and really has to talk and co-design with that community, listen to that community, and the community is often changing as well over time. So there's a lot of really important differences. In terms of the urban planning, urban design distinction, one of the things, the simplest way, I think, to define them is urban designers draw a lot. Urban planners, for the most part, don't. They're doing a lot more policy and very quantitative things, and both overlap in really useful and important ways. But that's one part of why you see so many drawings around this room, is that's what we do.
Yeah. So urban design is this thing that everyone you talk to has a different definition. So we don't try to make a definition of the singular thing that urban design is. It's operating within and across these three professions, and actually along with engineering, particularly civil engineering. And our job is weaving those pieces together. A lot of the time, we are concerned about learning the language of these different professions well enough that we can carry on communication with them and learn from them. Because most of the time, most of our education, we start in a year, but it's really a long period of time, a lifetime of learning from the people we're working with and incorporating what their knowledge into ours and into our design projects.
And I think that's one of the distinguishing features, actually, of the Georgia Tech urban design degree. A number of other schools only admit people with an architecture background. We deliberately try to get a group of students so that on each team, you've got maybe somebody who's an architect, someone who has a planning background, someone with landscape, someone with civil. And so that already in school, you're beginning to get that interdisciplinary focus.
Yeah. Well, for me, I wasn't planning on doing urban design when I was at Georgia Tech getting my master's in architecture. And I remember walking, into the urban design studios. In fact, I probably spent time in the urban design studios.
We had better food.
There was food and, really nice people. But every time I went there, I saw students working on large, pieces of land and large projects. And to me, as an architect, I realized that I'm being trained to solve one site's problems, yet the site is really embedded within a larger ecosystem of things that are impacting that particular site. And I remember thinking, I have to do urban design if any of my architecture projects are actually going to make any sense. And so I actually, I love it when people who have, a heavy architecture background or a different background come into urban design, because what you're going to see is the scale of impact and the ability to transform communities exponentially increase. Because a lot of people, will design like a community center and say, this community center is going to be a great asset for the community. It's going to change the community, but buildings don't change communities. Thoughtful frameworks change communities, and I think that's a big difference.
Yeah.
And that's a great sort of segue. So clearly, we taught Joel pretty well. But let's talk about the curriculum.
The studio, the center of the curriculum is the studio, obviously. It is in every design program. I'm sorry for taking on, I can't see without my glasses on, and I left my glasses in my at home today. I forgot. So the studio is the center of the curriculum. And this studio that I'm teaching now is what we do in the fall semester, which is usually, almost always, collaborating with Georgia Conservancy as a sponsor. The Conservancy is a conservation and urban design-oriented conservation organization for the state of Georgia. And we've worked in a long time in partnership, so they sponsor studios and arrange sponsors for studios, take on projects, particularly Atlanta, sometimes in other places like Savannah and along the Georgia coast. But what we usually deal with is the question of water, stormwater, and how stormwater and urban design come together. I make the case that climate change, as big of an issue that it is, affects our lives primarily through water. We talk about carbon all day, and that is the issue. But how it affects us is water. We either have too much or we don't have enough. So the studios here in Georgia, we usually have too much. And we work on studios that combine those two things. In this semester, we're taking the idea that we can expand the public domain, that is, street rights of way in parks, public buildings, by beginning to think of tributaries, water tributaries, creeks and streams, as an extension of that public domain. And we put two together and overlap them. They have a much richer set of connections ecologically and for human beings on bicycles, cars, by foot, whatever. Put those two things together opens up land and new possibilities for connecting communities and expanding the different varieties of housing sites, housing types, that they can be financed in different ways to address the problem of affordability, in creating communities that are diverse, that are accessible, that integrate natural processes into that framework and can change over time within that framework. So that's a project we're working on now that's in one of the core watersheds that connect into downtown Atlanta and goes to our Chattahoochee River. And it's all of that we're working on and struggling with. I was going to tell these students later, this is part of the semester, I start losing sleep at night. I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning worrying about these projects.
Because you're very passionate about
that's why I forgot
your glasses. Yeah.
Yeah, it happens because we're all in this together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things, if I may add, that I think is, this is something that, we discovered, when we were doing a research project not too long ago, particularly as we may be able to think about, Richard's kind of focus and the studio for this semester, that there is an intricate relationship between geomorphology or land, water, and cities. And I think the intersection of how those three things are constantly shaping each other yield great possibilities of how we think about retrofitting our cities, but also how we think about future city building. And I think you will hear a lot of, land, water, city conversation in all of our studios and the work. So.
Yeah. I want June Wang has just walked in, and I want to bring in June. Come on over. Hi. So, June, is an MSUD alum, but who has stayed at Georgia Tech to do her PhD in urbanism, because obviously we're really focused on training students mostly to become urban designers and in practice, but we actually have quite a few students who go on to become PhD students. So June, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Maybe I should take this off first. Yeah, I was a MSUD graduate, and I graduated in 2020 summer, and then I directly get into the PhD program with Alan, working on urban design and transportation. I found my experience at the MSUD program would be really helpful to my PhD study. I think because a huge part of our studio, I think what makes it special is it involves a lot of the research aspect in it, and Richard and Alan always include very academic explorations, and sometimes just give me the space to test my ideas in the studio, and I found that it's really helpful to my PhD study. And tell
us a little. I mean, you're looking at planning for autonomous vehicles, and that came out of your MSUD studio.
Yeah, at the very last studio I did with Wan Li, my classmate, my teammate, and we had a project in Covington, which is a small town in Newton County, and we proposed a housing project, but oriented that housing project on autonomous vehicles. So what if we massively adopt the autonomous vehicles, especially the public purpose one, for a suburban context area, and what it could bring to the disabilities and the people with disabilities, or the senior citizens who are unable to drive too far. And that really leads me to think about what our city will be if the future massively adopt autonomous vehicle, which is happening right now.
It could be heaven, it could be hell, but at least we have people working on it to try to get us to the right direction.
I will try my best.
Thank you very much,
Yeah,
June.
thank you.
Right. So the spring studio, Richard's studio in the fall, tends to really focus on how natural systems really influence urban form. In the spring, then we focus that much more on how real estate dynamics and transportation, the man-made systems, influence urban form.
And I get a chance to be in both worlds.
Well, and all the students do. I mean, that's the point. Obviously, the real trick is then knitting it all together.
Right.
So the spring studio always kicks off with the ULI Hines competition. This is a national competition. Usually has about 60, 70 urban design programs that submit to it. It always has a couple 100 or so submissions. Students have 2 weeks to produce comprehensive boards. This is the entry of a team. They have 2 weeks to produce a master plan and a whole concept of what they're designing on a site that they've only been given at the start of the 2 weeks. And they have to produce a pro forma figuring out what's it going to cost to buy the land, to construct the buildings, how much revenue will they receive at the end of 10 years. So it's really helps the students get, I think, a great understanding of working with some of the real estate students we have here at Georgia Tech, collaborating with the planners, collaborating with architecture students on teams to really also how to communicate graphically, because you don't get to say anything verbally. It all has to be on the boards, and really learn those communication skills that are so important to urban designers. Then we will typically do, oops, I've got one more, opening too fast. It's got a real lag here. Come on. Gosh, I can't get it to stay on the ULI competition Joel did. It just won't stay on it. All right. Here's another. This is the proposal that Joel did last. What I was just showing was last year's, which was one of 4 teams that made it to the finals out of all 116 teams. They won $10,000 for that. the year before, Joel's team got an honorable mention for this scheme in Miami, and knitting together a lot of all the different lessons of things. So the Spring Studio, this last spring, we were working with 3 county commissioners in DeKalb County, adjacent to Atlanta, where they had 2 dying shopping malls. So we went with the students and with the commissioners, went touring around, looking at the malls, studying the community impact, community impressions, and then the students developing mixed-use proposals for how these places could be completely redeveloped. This is the former North DeKalb Mall, which was just sold to a new developer, and that the students actually got to present their proposals to the new owner. So we really work on very real-world projects. And the students have to produce a regulatory plan that's really properly dimensioned with exact lots, as well as an illustrative plan. We even had some high-performance building students looking at things like outdoor comfort and actually measuring comfort and energy performance kinds of things. Come on, next. All right, that's all we're getting. That's the last one. The first image was that I just wanted to show. Oh, this is going slow. This is just from a couple weeks ago. We always have a welcome dinner at the beginning of the semester where all of the urban design students come together. I'm happy to cook for everybody, and then I tell everyone at the end of the semester, we have a potluck dinner and everybody cooks for me. So it's a very collegial group. We get along, I think, really well. And we stay in touch even after the studios. And so, Joel, if you want to talk a little about the jobs and what do people do once they have this degree?
Yeah, I'll start with a quick story. Several years ago, I was debating whether or not I should, go and get my master's in urban design or not. And I talked to one of my bosses at the time, Dan Watch. Dan Watch is the #1 lab designer in the world. He has written the only books that, talks about how to design labs. He recently retired. But Dan told me the reason why he was extremely successful in his career was because of his urban design degree that he ended up getting after he got his architecture degree. And he said, this is the reason why. He said, as soon as I got my urban design degree, when I went back to my office, they started putting me on the largest, most transformative projects. They never put me on the small architecture projects. They gave me the opportunity to manage and lead the largest, projects at the office. And he said, that was the beginning of the success of my career. And so I always tell students that when you come to our Masters of Urban Design program, you're going to have more jobs looking for you than you actually can be able to take because the city of Atlanta is growing, and we have more urban design work than there is urban designers to do work. Now, we have a lot of planners in Atlanta, but not a lot of urban designers. And right now, there's a lot of urban designers that are needed. I work at Parkins and Will in the Atlanta office, and we have the 2 people who actually lead the urban design practice in the Atlanta office are they went to Georgia Tech. They were students of Ellen and Richard. And just to put it in perspective, Jeff Williams, who is always here for reviews, is the only design principal in the entire Parkins and Will who is an urban designer. So that goes to tell you just the quality of students that come out of this program and the alumni that are spread across the world that are doing incredible work. And so there's, Parkins and Will, there's people working for the city of Atlanta. Actually, the folks who were running the urban design studio for the city of Atlanta are students who went to Georgia Tech.
The city of Nashville.
Yeah, city of Nashville. The city of Doraville, their chief planner was a student who graduated 2 years ago here. if you looked up, the Beltline in Atlanta, is one of the largest, most transformative urban scale projects in the world. Today was actually born out of Richard's urban design studio at Georgia Tech, and Ryan Gravel, who was the visionary, and Cassie Branham and Jeff Williams, who actually worked on that project, are still good friends here in Atlanta. And these people, are working for the UN. There's people in different countries, in China, in India, people who've gone through this program and are really doing incredible work across the world.
Yeah, it's really, it's always exciting to me to hear of one of our students will sort of say, well, yeah, I've got this job now, I'm working for the UN on either, sometimes, whether they're in, we've had one in Nigeria, we've had another working out of Jordan and Egypt. We've had students at the alums, not students anymore, but working for the World Bank. So a lot of our students, sometimes they will they'll stay with whatever that first professional degree was in. They sort of continue at a firm that is primarily landscape or architecture or whatever, but they become the urban person, kind of within that. Or they're working truly as an urban designer, in public and private sector.
And the real thing to understand is an architecture profession or landscape or planning, career choices are like this. It's very traditional. It's made up of the way the profession itself operates and the clients. With an urban design degree, job opportunities and career options go like this in ways that we can't imagine. Imagine going to school and going to work for the UN. In refugee programs. Of course, we know how to deal with complex problems, establishing frameworks within which multiple people can solve those problems. And ultimately, we're thinking like architects, landscape architects, and city planners all at the same time.
Well, one example that I think is actually just incredible. Last year during the pandemic, a former student, Sam Stephen, who was from India, he was here, got his urban design degree. During the pandemic, when his company was laying off, they laid off a whole bunch of people who they let go because of the pandemic. And this is what Sam told me. Because I had a degree in architecture and urban design, they asked me to actually stay on because I was more useful to the firm because I could do architecture, I could do urban design, I could be versatile across the different departments. And so a lot of people found that actually with an urban design degree coming out of the pandemic, that you are more valuable. And simply because a lot of people are doing now more planning work, as they're speculating on what's going to happen to the economy, which makes urban designers extremely valuable. And so I thought that was an interesting story that came out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think our curriculum does a good job of really preparing students for, that versatility in many ways. We require courses in history of urban form that Richard teaches. We require a course in theories of urban design that I teach. We have a required course on introduction to real estate finance and learning about those pro formas, and a course on urban systems, especially really focusing a lot on urban ecology. Then we also have the summer semester. And the summer semester is very special. That's the one semester we don't have a studio. What we mostly encourage students to do is to go on the Modern Architecture, Modern City trip, which is, I'll let Richard talk about in a minute. Basically, it's a study tour in Europe. Or we also have great opportunities for doing research here in Atlanta. So we've had students with the pandemic and we weren't allowed to do Modern Architecture, Modern City. We really amped up and had, I think, students really take advantage of all of the technology resources, the library resources, the faculty resources at a tier 1. Georgia Tech is a top level. And so the students really get you get 2 options in summer.
Yeah, Modern Architecture and Modern City began that program as a resistance against what Georgia Tech and many other architecture schools did on international study trips. That is, you go from building to building to building to building. He said, no, we're going to go to 4 cities, and we're going to spend 2 weeks in each city so that when we're done, we know the city, we know the circumstances, we know the history of the city, we know the leading projects that have been done, particularly in the 20th century. They don't spend a lot of time talking about medieval cities and that era, or the 18th. They're very much about the 19th till we get to the end. The 19th to 20th century, what produced in these cities was produced in the 19th and 20th century, and how do we begin to understand it? So we see the great projects of modernism in the late 19th century, urban projects, and we visit offices in cities and really learn it. So I've had students who've been on the program 15 years later come back and say, I'm going to Paris. What was it we looked at that was so interesting? And I have to go back and think what it might be talking about. And I find it and then give them advice. Or they ask, what's new in Paris? What's recent? So we go to New York, which is a new addition. We've been ignoring the U.S. and because we have so many students from other places. We now start in New York, we call the capital of the 20th century. Then we include Paris, which obviously was the capital of the 19th century. We go to London, which is the other capital of the 19th century. And Berlin, that special place that is riveted in the Western imagination with World War I and World War II, and was the beginnings of a lot of modern architecture and modern urbanism, which we sometimes did not happen, but nevertheless is part of our legacy. We take side trips, and over the time that changes every year. We usually make side trips to Barcelona, but we've also been to Helsinki, to Copenhagen, to Stockholm, other places. Those are places that are interesting, that are short stops, a week or less. But what it does is give an education about contemporary urban design history that's happened through sometimes going way back, but mostly in the 19th and 20th century, as a framework that then take everywhere. But we have to admit and remember that whatever produced Western or urbanism coming out of Europe and then secondarily America has been exported, for better or worse, across the world. So we're better equipped to deal with it, having known where that comes from, and what it means and what it might not mean and how it might be changed from place to place.
And hopefully we'll add Africa to that list very soon here. My fingers are crossed.
Yeah. I mean, I think great urban designers really need to experience great urban places. So it's not just about studying them, but it's really, actually being there and being able to understand, why did this work so well here and yet it didn't work there? Learning how to really understand and read different places is so essential. And I think it's also key that so much of what, again, I think distinguishes this program from a lot of others is in the design studios, we focus exclusively on redevelopment. It's how do we go into the existing places, existing communities, and help make them better places, work with those communities to solve a range of issues. So those historic great cities also have a lot of lessons that really, really help us understand.
So we're not, what Ellen was trying to say is we're not utopians. We're not looking at some distant future to imagine. We're pragmatic, but we have pragmatic imaginations. We're solving problems with our imaginations.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah. So I want to invite you to learn more about the program by visiting our YouTube channel. It is MSUD GATech, Georgia Tech. So MSUD GATECH. is that our channel on YouTube, and we have lots of much shorter videos from different people, students, alums, faculty, and including we're about to tape a new one with Robin Tucker, is the academic advisor, and she is the person all prospective students really need to get to know, because Robin will help you understand the logistics, how to apply, how to applying for financial aid, all of those really, the housing,
Visa complexities.
visa issues, absolutely.
She's on top of it.
And Mitra Wisdom is the other academic advisor. Both Mitra and Robin tag team on everything. So really just want to invite you to check out the videos for a lot more information.
Yep.
Any closing words? Johnny, do you want to do a little tour?
We have to get back to work on the studio. We've invaded the studio, so we have to get back to work. And critical thing is, if you want to know more about us, ask questions. Joel's got an email, I've got an email, Ellen's got an email. Send us emails. Send us a question. We answer promptly because we're trying to get you to come to Georgia Tech.
Yeah, please feel free to reach out to me. Over the years, I've had so many students reach out to me, talk to me on the phone, and then on the first day of class, they'll say, Joe, I talked to you on the phone, son, and I'm like, you did? Wait, so please feel free. I'll be happy to get on the phone with you. I know some of you use WhatsApp. Some of you have reached me on WhatsApp before. Just call you directly to your international cell phones if you have any specific questions. I'll be happy to get on the phone with you and just talk about jobs, internship opportunities, the curriculum, how to apply, and all of that. How visa things. I was an international student myself, so I understand the complexities of visas and all of that. So if I can be of any resource, please feel free to reach out.
And the website has a lot of other resources too. You can find out just more about, we have a lot of, some of the testimonials just talk about, life in Atlanta. What is this like as a place to live? We also have our video and podcast series that I host called Redesigning Cities, which has just a really great range of speakers on important topics related to redesigning cities, because that's kind of what we do.
Right. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
See you soon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.